All right, I wanted to do a quick overview here, just kind of a beginner and intermediate guide, real quick, going over Meshtastic, which is off-grid LoRa mesh networking. I just want to kind of cover this a little bit. So, what is Meshtastic? You may have heard about it. It's an open source project that uses LoRa radios to create a long-range off-grid mesh network. Now, it works without Wi-Fi or cell phone service. And when I talk about LoRa, I'm talking about long range. It's a kind of an off-grid mesh network. It enables text messages, GPS sharing, and sensor data. One of the important things is there's no radio license required for LoRa. So unlike, say, ham radio or GMRS, Meshtastic runs on an unlicensed bands. Typically in the United States, it's like 915 megahertz, and so no radio licenses are required to use that. So, in really simple terms, it allows you to send short messages without self-service or Wi-Fi, and by connecting some small devices in a mesh, making it perfect for, say, outdoor adventures, remote areas, emergency communications. They run on low power, typically small batteries, very small devices, and the strength of it is in the mesh. So the more nodes you have, the better that it will operate. So again, I mentioned LoRa radios will connect in a mesh type of network. Um, Devices forward messages for each other. The mesh allows the range to be extended well beyond line of sight. And also messages are encrypted using AES 256 if you're familiar with that at all. Um, Again, I mentioned a little bit in the US, the regional LoRa bands. Typically, it's 902, 928 megahertz, I believe. In the European Union, I believe it's like 868, 433 megahertz, and it varies by country. So it's important that when you get hardware, that you get it for the region that you're in. Typical range for these devices is about 1 to 3 miles in a say an urban area, 3 to 5 perhaps in open areas. It really depends a lot on the topography. If you're indoors, if you're indoors in a building, I'm sure it's going to cut down on your range quite a bit. But the range gets extended with the mesh hops. So again, why typically would somebody want to use it? I'd say even in today's connected world where you've got internet, you've got Wi-Fi, you have cell phone service, there are times when conventional networks will fail or they're unavailable. Say if you're out in a very remote area, Meshtastic can really shine in those types of scenarios. Say you've got hiking, camping, and outdoors. You can stay in touch with a group in the backcountry or say in mountains, where there's no cell signal. And many users report they use this for family camping trips, to coordinate hikes and meetups, things like that. Um, Crowded events as well. At festivals or large events where maybe cellular networks are congested, Meshtastic devices can let friends text each other off grid. Emergency preparedness, it's very useful for that. Um, Say in natural disasters or power outages that maybe knock out infrastructure. A Meshtastic mesh can provide backup for local emergency communications. It's popular with preppers as well for its ability to send messages when nothing else works. Yeah, if your Wi-Fi is down, cell networks are down. And people also like to set up community networks, which is kind of fun. There's a lot of hobbyists that get involved in Meshtastic. Hobbyists and neighborhood groups are setting up local meshes, for example. I'm going to show an example here in a little bit for, let's say, the Austin Mesh Network, Austin, Texas. Um, they do a lot of experimenting. They provide a community-owned communications layer for their area. It's a fun way to meet fellow radio and tech enthusiasts as well. Off-roading, cycling, skating, any kind of group activity in a remote area. Meshtastic can help keep everybody connected with location pings and messages without needing, a repeater tower. A lot of the devices have GPS integrated into them, so it can be very useful. Um, there's a lot of hardware options out there. Initially, when Meshtastic got started, there was a lot of DIY boards out there. It was LilyGO, T-Beam, Heltec, LoRa 32. There's Rack. There's WizBlock or WiseBlock. I'm not sure exactly on the pronunciation. And today, we're starting to see a lot more pre-built devices, which I think is pretty cool. I think that's really going to be a lot of the future in Meshtastic. I think it's going to take off a lot more when we have pre-built devices. For example, there's a company Spec5. They make a Ranger, Spec5 Ranger, which has a QWERTY keyboard. It's a handheld device. There's also the Spec5 Trekker, which is kind of just a plug-and-play node, a fairly small device. Where can you buy hardware? Well, there's a lot of options here. You have a lot of DIY kits from Amazon, LilyGO, Heltec. Uh, there's a Rack Wireless store. You also have pre-built ones, Spec5. There's Tindy or Etsy, where you can also get some custom builds. I'm going to show you those here right now. We're going to go to a few of these websites, and I can show you those. Yeah, I'll note too here that you've even got another source here. Looks like Etsy. Now, Spec5 also sells these directly. Um, I guess Spec5 has their own Etsy shop as well. This is one set of devices that I'm very interested in checking out. They have quite a range of devices, and some of those are even listed here on Etsy. So there's several places that you can go to and look for these. This is one that has a keyboard, the Meshtastic lower radio, touchscreen. So what I did is I went to products, and then it's basically called a sense cap. So if you look under sense cap, can I get that to come up again or not? There we go. Sense cap card tracker T1000E from Meshtastic. So that is the one that I got. So I guess you want to be a little careful what you're ordering and what you're getting here. It wasn't clear to me if it came with the power cord. I ordered a power cord. There's also like a clip on, like oh my goodness, what do you call it? Do you put around your neck? I already can't remember what it is, but there's some accessories that I got for it. But basically, it has a battery built into it. I think it claims it has like a 3-day battery life, a snap hook. So I got the snap hooks. I ordered the charging cable to go with it, but you can see it's very small. This is something you could clip onto a backpack or whatever, and basically it gives you Meshtastic. And again, you would tie this to your phone. And another source that I'm really interested in checking out is Spec5. I'm hearing a lot about them. I believe they might have been at the Hamvention in Dayton. I missed that, by the way, but they actually have some really cool looking products. And what I like about this, it says they're made in Texas. They're out of the box ready. They're claiming they have support that sticks with you. And they've got a lot of different options here. They have the Spec5 Ranger, Spectre, Beacon, Magnum. I'm really interested in some of these devices that they've got. And I think this is where Meshtastic is really going to take off because not everyone wants to buy the enclosures and the boards and put this all together by themselves. They want to buy a ready-made device. And you've got some of these here, like this Spec5 Ranger. It's $179.99. Basically, you've got oh wow, you got a full QWERTY keyboard. You have GPS integration. You got looks like a decent antenna on the top of it. Um, you've got different firmware options here. It looks like there's Meshtastic, ATAC. I'll go into that a little bit more at another time. One of the cool things, I know they were talking about having maps available on this, so you'd have GPS built in. You also have some mapping capabilities. So if you're not able to rely on your cellular network, you realize that most cell phones, if you're relying on Google Maps or most of your map apps, those apps are being delivered to you over the cellular network, or perhaps if you're in an indoor area where you have Wi-Fi, you're getting your map data that way. There are map apps that you can use on an Android cell phone where you have to download maps, and you can use those. I want to say there's maps.me. There's some other ones out there that I can't think of off the top of my head. But this allows you here to download these maps locally to your device, and then with a built-in GPS, you could have mapping. So you could lose your cell network, you could lose Wi-Fi, and as long as you have GPS connectivity to GPS satellites, you're going to have mapping capabilities. So pretty cool, honestly. This is another one. Hopefully someday I'll be able to check this one out and maybe check a device out. So again, if you're looking to find out if you have a local mesh network in your area, you can use meshmap.net. It's really a good global Meshtastic node map. It can help find out if there's nodes locally in your area. You can join or you can do some searching, find some Meshtastic forums. I believe there's some Discord forums out there as well for local groups. And many U.S. cities have their own community nodes. I mentioned before, it's a mesh type of network, so you can have various nodes, and as long as you have the ability and you're within range of another node, you might have somebody that's like miles away in node D, but you're able to reach node B, and then that node B forwards the message on to C, which then forwards it on to D, and then back from D to C to B to A and so on. So you don't have to have direct line of sight between node A and node D. And say if you're not within the 1 or 2 or 3 mile range, typically that you might get, this might be 10 miles away. You might be 20 miles away between nodes A and D. But as long as you have nodes in between that can forward messages on, you can get a connection. And that's really the power of this mesh. Again, typical ranges for Meshtastic. I think the world record was over 200 miles, and you got to have some ideal conditions, some high antennas, and I don't recall. That's very extreme long range. In rural areas, you may get a few miles, suburban, urban. Your ranges are going to vary quite a bit. A lot of it has to do with do you have a repeater nearby? Do you have a node nearby? That can rebroadcast your signal, and so on. So there's a lot of variables involved with your communications ranges. But again, like I showed in the example here with this diagram example, the network example, uh, each user's smartphone connects via Bluetooth, typically to a LoRa radio device, and then those devices communicate with other nodes over long-range radio links, which is LoRa, the LoRa standard. Every node can relay messages to extend the coverage of the mesh. And again, Meshtastic uses LoRa, which I mentioned before. It's a long-range, low bit rate radio technology, and it's used to link the devices in a peer-to-peer mesh network. Each Meshtastic node device is essentially a tiny little radio and microcontroller that can send, receive, and forward messages. When one node transmits a message, any node that's in range will pick it up and rebroadcast it. So the message hops across the network until it reaches all the intended recipients. Um, there's a store and forward mesh routing, so it means there's no real central tower or router. Every node is a router, which extends the reach to the entire group. Device pairing, you've got device pairing with these. Typically, you'll compose and read messages using a phone or a computer that's paired to the Meshtastic radio via Bluetooth, which is most common. Also, Wi-Fi is optional with some boards or maybe even USB. So here's one good resource that you can go to. You have meshtastic.org, and here it has a nice introduction explaining that Meshtastic is a project that enables you to use inexpensive LoRa, which is just short for long range radios, as a long range off grid communications platform in areas without existing or reliable communications infrastructure. This project is 100% community driven and is open source, which is pretty cool. And I really like the diagram that they have here because one of the questions I always get is, Do I need to have Wi-Fi? Do I need to have internet access to use my cell phone or my computer? And as you can see here, the only thing you need, if you have the Meshtastic app downloaded on your phone, you only need a Bluetooth connection to your LoRa or your Meshtastic device. It's connected via Bluetooth. So a lot of the very simple Meshtastic devices, as you see in this diagram, a lot of them don't even have screens. Now there are some now that are having built-in Android screens for functionality and even keyboards, but your very inexpensive ones do not. So it's just a Bluetooth connection. So it could be Bluetooth to your phone. Some of them have USB, so you can see in this example with a computer, you could have USB, you could have a Wi-Fi connection, or even Bluetooth. And a lot of that depends on what is available. A lot of the cheapest Meshtastic devices may only have USB and Bluetooth. Some do have Wi-Fi. It depends a lot on the boards that are being used. And now you do have an example of kind of an all-in-one Meshtastic device here that will connect to other devices, and you can have a keyboard and maybe a display built into it. But typically, people will download the Meshtastic app and use Bluetooth as their connection. So you have, it can be very long range. Like I say, it depends on the mesh network. Looks like there was a record of 331 kilometers that was set by Martin R7 and Alec. I don't recall that here, but they had a range of 331, 205 miles. It was just, I guess that's a post from Reddit, but it is very, very slow. Um, I guess I don't know how high they mounted this thing. I guess this is kind of an example of what they did in connecting. So you can get long range depending on how high up you go. I've heard of people doing things like even putting these on balloons and so on. It's a very decentralized network. It's very resilient. Because this network is decentralized, it doesn't rely on any cell towers. Again, it does not rely on Wi-Fi. It doesn't even rely on satellites. So if some nodes go offline, the remaining nodes will automatically reconfigure the mesh routes so it's very self-healing and robust. So as long as you have enough nodes out there that can basically reconfigure the routes, you're all good to go. Um, One of the good resources that you have out there is the mesh map, which is at meshmap.net, and you can see here, for example, around the Cincinnati area, Columbus area here, you've got information here. It looks like 3 minutes ago, you've actually got information about different nodes that are out there. So it's great. The problem is you'll get out into some rural areas and you're going to find fewer and fewer. Like I can look here, see that you've got one here. Uptime, 22 hours, 49 minutes, tells you the power usage, firmware, and so on. And yeah, it's pretty cool. So, depending on where you're located, like here is in Kentucky, northern Kentucky, you've got a number of them here. A lot of these that people set up, they use solar. I've seen some examples of some that are like $100 for just a simple repeater with maybe a 3200 amp hour battery and a solar panel. Then it's rated to be put outdoors, so you could actually set up your own. Um, I think as this grows, we're going to have more and more repeaters set up, so the network is just going to grow over time. But definitely meshmap.net is a good resource. So it really makes Meshtastic ideal for unreliable environments. The only real limitation would be that each node must stay within radio range of at least one other node. So that's the drawback. If you're in a very remote area where you're the only node and you can't connect to any other node, you will have problems at that point. So you got to be connected to at least another node. And that's where the mesh really helps. Intermediate nodes are really required in order to fill in those gaps. So we kind of covered the ranges of and the frequencies and so on. Um, Now, in some areas where they're able to use the 433 megahertz frequencies, they can propagate a little bit further than some of the higher ones, but they also have some stricter power limits. So, Meshtastic's pretty flexible. I think in the U.S. I mentioned it's like in the 900 megahertz range. And a lot of people are going to ask the question, now, how far can it go? And that's like not a very easy question to answer. I've mentioned here that, it can vary so much. There's not really one strict rule. The answer is it really depends a lot on terrain, antennas, and settings. You can get better gain antennas. Terrain is very important. LoRa is very famous for long range. I actually have sensors in my home that work on LoRa. It's not using Meshtastic, but I have some outdoor motion sensors. I have leak detection sensors, sump pump level sensors, and all of these devices are communicating over LoRa, not using Wi-Fi. They connect to a central hub. Now that hub then connects to Wi-Fi so that I could be away from my home and look at the information on my cell phone. But again, it's relying on the LoRa network. And so Meshtastic also rides on that same LoRa setup. Like I think I mentioned, typical range with, stock small antennas and devices at ground level, you might be able to expect anywhere between 1 to 3 miles. Maybe that's 1.5 to 5 kilometers. Maybe in an urban or suburban area, you might be able to get 3 to 5 miles in an open rural area that's doesn't have a lot of rolling terrain. And that's, from node to node. And those estimates really vary quite a bit. You're assuming they're a few feet off the ground at least. In a dense city environment where you're going to have a lot of buildings, the range could easily drop to something under a mile. In forests or hilly terrain, you may only get 1 to 2 miles, maybe less, maybe more. It's really variable. Um, for optimal conditions, you'd really want to have a good clear line of sight. Say if you have two people on hilltops or maybe a node that's mounted high up, your range could be increased quite dramatically. Several kilometers is easily achieved. And again, I mentioned here there's a world record out there. It's like 331 kilometers or like 205 miles. And I believe they used high gain antennas, high altitude positions. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, you'd have to have some pretty ideal conditions. I've heard of some people, I think it's Spec5 that has a Meshtastic device that it comes with a drone. So, I mean, I think the drone battery is maybe only good for 15 minutes, but you can put that high up in the air, get some long range communications. I think you'd even be better off if you put something like that on a balloon. If you could put up a balloon, you get quite a bit longer range and more time to be able to use that. So again, it's largely out of sight. I've heard of people being able to communicate, over mountains, and it all depends on nodes that you have in between. If you and your friend are in some flat area and you have a hill that stands in between you, you might only get, a kilometer or so out, but you might get lucky, and if you connect to nodes that are higher up, maybe go on the upward slope, you might actually be able to work it through other nodes and get around that obstacle. So it depends. Now, there are some things that you can do. I think Meshtastic provides, there's a site planner web tool, I believe I've heard about, where you can input a node's location and see kind of a coverage map. Um, you might want to check that out too. I think that you might be able to find that through meshtastic.org. I haven't looked at that personally, but that might be a good resource as well. I've had some questions people ask me like, well, can I stream video over this or anything like that? The thing that you got to keep in mind is that Meshtastic is really for very short messages. And LoRa is for, also sensor data, things like that. It's not for streaming video. It's uh, very LoRa is very low bandwidth. So while you can extend ranges, you don't want to you can't expect any kind of real-time high-speed data or anything like that. You know, every hop that you make will add some delay. You've got store and forward, you know, between nodes, so that's going to add a lot of delay in there. Um, there's good redundancy in this network. There's not really a single point of failure, but the fact that every node hop does add delay, you can expect that it's going to take a little time, perhaps, for some of these messages to get through. You know, you may get 5 hops or whatever. Um, it really depends a lot on the network. So I'd say really if you're just starting out and you're looking at building a network, you know, you're starting out new, um, I would say start out small at first. Get at least 2 devices. You know, try to convince a friend to get one too. If you have at least 2 nodes, you can do some simple range tests between those. Get familiar with sending messages. There's a lot of starter kits out there that are sold in pairs. I think you can get a pair of, you know, T-beams or maybe a pair of Spec5 Trekkers would be a great way to get going. Those are fairly inexpensive. Um, Now, a lot of devices you have to keep aware, especially the DIY stuff. Most devices will come blank or maybe with old firmware, so you may need to install the latest Meshtastic firmware using the official Meshtastic Flasher app. It's a simple graphical user interface tool or a command line. Um, you can get some instructions there for using that at meshtastic.org. There'll be a good guide there to walk you through that. It's usually as easy as just plugging in a USB and clicking flash. And I think there is some things you got to be concerned about with what type of USB connection you use to charge and connect to it. I've heard of people damaging boards with certain USB type connections, but just you know be wary of whatever type of hardware you're using and how to go about that. A lot of people shy away from that idea of having to flash devices. Um, Use the app and make sure you install the Meshtastic app on your phone, especially if you're using something like a Spec5 Trekker, just a very simple device that doesn't have a screen on it. You're going to want the Meshtastic app on your phone. Pair it via Bluetooth. You know, once you're connected, you can set a name for your node, change channels, and then of course send messages. Out of the box, so the devices use the default channel usually with a default encryption key. So any new node will automatically talk to any other new node in range. So it's wise to set your own channel key if you want privacy for your group. So you may want to do that if you want to have your own private group. There's channels and encryption. Meshtastic channels define the radio parameters, the frequency, the spreading factor, and encryption. By default, all devices will use the same Meshtastic channel settings and default key. But if you want to join some existing mesh in your area, you're going to need to know their channel settings, or they could be turned on by default for say your own personal mesh, you can leave defaults or customize. Just ensure that all your nodes that are in your little private network that you want, they use identical settings, or they're not going to communicate. And the app makes that easy. Once I get a device, I want to run through that. Hopefully, do a little bit of my own tutorial once I figure this out. Uh, Another thing to think about is power and antennas. You know, make sure to attach the LoRa antenna firmly to your device before transmitting. Some bands have tiny little connectors, so you got to be careful with some of these. You want to use some good batteries. I think there's 18 18650 lithium ion for T-beam. There's use a good battery. Um, Charge devices like the Ranger or Trekker or whatever you're using. Fully charged battery is going to make sure you get maximum range and time. I know some of the V3 boards with smaller batteries, People maybe get a day out of those. Depends on a lot on how many milliamp hours your battery has. Some devices you can get several days. It really just depends a lot. So you want to check that when you're buying a device. How long will that device last before you need to recharge it? If you've got one that only lasts, say, 5 hours, may not be something that you want to take out on a long hike, because at the end of that hike, it may be drained before that. Yeah, and I'd say experiment and learn. Try sending GPS locations, like it's a where you are feature in the app. You can set up some message acknowledgments. Meshtastic will allow show like a check mark, I believe, when a message is delivered across the mesh. And experiment with different radio presets. There's things like long, slow versus short, fast, and see what the effect on these are on range and latency. The Meshtastic community out there is really helpful. Um, you can set it up. I think the long and slow and short and fast can kind of determine how many node hops are you willing to work with. Things like that. There's some complex settings involved there. I don't want to say complex, but there's some settings that you want to get familiar with as well. And it's really Meshtastic. It's a community-driven project. Users will often share their nodes' existence on public maps. If you go to look at Meshtastic nodes at the meshmap.net, a lot of those nodes are published by people who actually own those nodes. Um, so it's a great resource. I think uh, uh, I think right now around 2025 there may be somewhere in the range. I think I heard there was like 6,800 nodes or so that have been seen on global MQTT linked maps, like meshmap.net. Um, so there's getting to be more and more. Check your area. If you want to see if a mesh network exists in your area, first go look at that public map for any of those nodes or activity around your city, or search online for communities in your city. Join a group. Give it a try. I'm going to be testing a unit out here as soon as I get it, and hope to have some real world examples, show you guys a little bit more, but kind of some exciting stuff. So I hope some of this has been helpful. If it has, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and we'll do some more videos, hopefully with some more detail. Take care.